Asia-Pacific stocks mostly rise as investors assess trade developments in the region. India bans Pakistani imports after deadly attacks on India-administered Kashmir, threatening billions in backdoor trade revenue for both nations. And global oil prices plunged to multi-year lows, sending shockwaves through energy markets and national economies. Hello, I'm Taiba Aiden with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. Chinese stocks resumed trading after the Labor Day holidays amid signs of Washington and Beijing taking a more conciliatory approach to resolving trade disputes after a series of tit-for-tat tariffs. The mainland CSI 300 index rose 0.95%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng index added 0.67%. Meanwhile, China's Caixin Services Purchasing Managers Index came in at a 7-month low of 50.7 in April, compared to 51.9 the previous month. Over in India, the benchmark Nifty 50 fell 0.15%, while the BSE Sensex moved up 0.14% in early trade. India has reportedly proposed zero tariffs on steel, auto components and pharmaceuticals on a reciprocal basis, and to a certain amount of imports, while Malaysia said on Monday that Washington had agreed further talks. Joining us now for more is Jamil Ahmed, Chief Analyst at Forex broker GTC. Hi there, Jamil. Now, there seems to be some developments in trade talks between Asian nations and the US. So what do we know so far? Any specific agreements being discussed?
Well, if we're taking the narrative that's provided from the White House, then we have a number of discussions taking place with a number of different trading partners worldwide, not in Asia only. But I think that looking at the significant economic downgrades that have come in recent weeks, let's just mention the IMF that made the United States the biggest downgrade of advanced nations by close to 1 percentage point overall for this year, then clearly time is not on the side if we're going to continue economic momentum for the United States to continue with this trade erratic policy. So I think that's also weighing into sentiment somewhat. And if you also look at financial market sentiment overall, we've actually seen that since the April lows, financial markets have recovered all ground. And despite how low the market was looking about a month ago or so, we've actually now on a winning streak that we've not seen in decades. We also have to look at the economic data. We did have a US GDP contraction last week, which was somewhat unexpected to some, and that seems to be pushing somewhat of the pressure cooker that the United States needs to make those trade deals sooner rather than later.
And we've heard that India has reportedly proposed zero tariffs on certain industrial products like steel, auto parts and pharmaceuticals. Could this speed up trade negotiations for India?
It's possible. On any given day, we don't know exactly what the US administration wants. You see a different industry, a different product named pretty much on a daily basis. Yesterday it was movies and so forth when it comes to tariffs. Of course, that's a global phenomenon. Let's see whether what certain economies are proposing and put on the table, whether that's enough for the US White House to make a deal.
Looking at China now, we've heard that services activity expanded at the slowest pace in 7 months. What is this slowdown down to? Is it mainly tariffs or is there more to it?
I think there's more to it than meets the eye when it comes to that specific data. We've been talking about the Chinese economy seemingly slowing down now for a number of years. And in fact, if you look at government GDP targets compared to now, compared to 5 years or so ago, clearly the newer normal for China is slower and gradual growth rather than double-digit growth. You look at the government GDP targets, somewhere near 5% again for 2025, same as 2024. That was somewhat unexpected and a bit of a surprise because when you've got tariff aggression, global economic downgrades and so forth, there are concerns as to whether the Chinese economy can get over the line. You look at the specific services data, I wouldn't say a one-off report means that there's a line in the sand. But I do think that the Chinese economy will need some help and stimulus from authorities over the coming months, weeks, and maybe even trading days just to help get over what is complete trade aggression from the United States.
All right, Jamil Ahmed, Chief Analyst at GTC, thank you very much for joining us. Now, one of the largest sources of revenue for India and Pakistan comes through backdoor trade, where goods are routed via third countries. It generates billions of dollars for both economies, but a recent Indian ban on Pakistani imports may threaten this. It comes after New Delhi blamed Pakistan for an attack in Indian-administered Kashmir that left at least 26 people dead. Emre Boz has more.
Backdoor trade, also known as indirect or roundabout trade, involves exchanging goods between two countries through third-party nations. It bypasses direct trade restrictions, high tariffs, or political barriers. For India and Pakistan, goods are routed through countries like Dubai, Singapore, Sri Lanka, or Afghanistan. For example, Pakistani textiles may be shipped to Dubai, relabeled, and then exported to India. According to the Global Trade and Research Initiative, backdoor trade generates $10 billion a year for both countries combined. Direct trade declined due to events like the 2019 Pulwama attack, after which India imposed a 200% tariff on Pakistan. Between April 2024 and January 2025, direct trade fell to just $0.42 million. But now, this latest incident, the attack in Indian-administered Kashmir, threatens this unofficial trade relationship. India blames Pakistan, saying it's banning all direct and indirect imports from the country.
I congratulate our Prime Minister. The day before yesterday, we appealed that all trade with Pakistan, whether direct or indirect through Dubai, must be suspended.
No country should buy goods from Pakistan. Pakistan uses the money it earns from us to generate militancy, which in turn harms us. We do not accept it. No goods from Pakistan should be imported to our Jammu or the rest of India.
Pakistan has already retaliated, banning imports from Indian origin goods either directly from India or via third countries. The government says the move is to protect the country's national security and public interests.
Pakistan's airspace will be closed with immediate effect for all Indian-owned or Indian-operated airlines. All trade with India, including to and from any third country, through Pakistan is suspended forthwith.
As tensions escalate, this once profitable trade may come to a halt. Emre Boz, TRT World.
And for more, we're joined by Anupam Manur in Bengaluru, India. He's a professor of economics at the Takshashila Institution. Now, Professor, with India banning both direct and indirect imports from Pakistan, how significant is the threat to the $10 billion backdoor trade between these two nations?
Well, in terms of direct trade, India's minimal imports from Pakistan will now fall close to zero. After the 200% tariff on Pakistani goods, this will significantly reduce imports from about $2.9 million to a mere $400,000 in 24-25. Indirect trade, though, is much higher, as you have indicated, with figures as high as $10 billion, which is routed to Dubai, Singapore, and even Sri Lanka. But this new stance by India targets both the direct and indirect trade routes, and while it may even be partially successful, it can cause adequate friction for traders on either side. There will be a significant increase in transaction costs to deliver goods from Pakistan into the Indian borders, which might be prohibitive for trade. Now, even if this figure reduces by half, it can be a significant blow to Pakistan's already fragile balance of payments and forex reserves. The most significant challenge, though, is the closure of airspace and the blocking of ports, which was just discussed.
And can either side realistically enforce a full shutdown of third-party trade routes, particularly through hubs like Dubai and Singapore?
This is difficult, given that most of the rerouting and relabeling of goods happen in ports, such as Dubai, and this is done by private parties. So it will be difficult to enforce a full shutdown. The customs officials in both countries will have their hands quite full. However, some of the onus will actually lie on traders themselves, as they would be aware of the country of origin when they make these purchases. Now, given that the patriotic emotion is running quite high and traders are also broadly in support with the government's ban, I think it has a much higher probability of success. India can also, remember, engage diplomatically with the third-party countries to prevent the movement of these goods. This, I think, will add further friction and can make trade difficult. So, is it easy to do a full shutdown? I don't think so. But it is, I think, possible to create enough friction in trade.
And doesn't this further fuel current global trade tensions?
Oh, for sure it does. But we have to remember that the trade volumes between the two countries are negligible, especially to India. So even with the unofficial trade of $10 billion that we were speaking about, it is just 1% of total trade volume for India in the previous year. So I think in that sense, it's not such a big deal. The more important thing is about the signaling and the disruptions to trade, which is already in quite a fragile state in the global world order.
And do you think bans like this achieve national security goals, or do they just end up hurting small businesses and consumers on both sides?
In my opinion, it's neither about national security nor about hurting business or consumer interests, but I think about punitive actions and sending signals. If, as I said, most of the imports from Pakistan into India is rather niche products, such as figs and dry fruits, herbs and Himalayan pink salt, the absence of which might not cause such a furor. Alternatives can be found, and marginal price increases will not harm the general Indian consumer. The volume of trade, as I'd spoken about, is quite negligent for this to have any real big impact.
Professor Anupam Manur from the Takshashila Institution, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now a quick look at some of the other top business stories from around the world. Audi kicked off 2025 with a strong start despite challenges like rising competition, a weaker global outlook and geopolitical tensions. The car maker posted a 12.4% jump in first quarter earnings thanks to a sharper product mix and booming battery EV demand. It also delivered over 46,000 EVs during the 3-month period, marking a 30% surge. Meanwhile, Ford has suspended its annual forecast due to the financial impact of President Trump's tariffs, warning that the company faces a significant $1.5 billion hit. Ford is re-evaluating its operations as costs from imports soar, while competitors like General Motors are adjusting their forecasts. And European firms are exceeding earnings expectations despite ongoing trade tensions and economic uncertainty. In a surprising turn, many companies are showing resilience. The pharmaceutical, banking and technology sectors led the charge. However, caution lingers over tariffs and their impact on growth. Investors remain optimistic, buoyed by recent stock market gains. Still ahead on the programme, oil prices plunge, shaking markets and economies worldwide. Who stands to gain and who risks collapse? We'll find out all the details after the break. Welcome back. Hollywood filmmakers say they are baffled by Donald Trump's plan to impose a 100% tariff on all movies produced outside the United States. Trump claims the American film industry is dying. He's blaming incentives offered by other countries, which he says lure filmmakers away from Hollywood. It's still unclear how the tariffs will be applied and whether they'll affect streaming services.
Hollywood is being destroyed. Now, you have an incompetent, grossly incompetent governor that allowed that to happen. So I'm not just blaming other nations, but other nations, a lot of them, have stolen our movie industry. And I'm saying if they're not willing to make a movie inside the United States, then we should have a tariff on movies that come in.
Probably prices will go up. It'll probably get more expensive to make movies. So either fewer movies will get made or the movies that get made will be more expensive. Those costs will then probably get passed down the line, so it'll be more expensive to go to the movies. Tickets will go up, and then it'll be harder for people to buy movie tickets. Probably fewer people go to the movies. The whole movie industry at the moment is in a crisis already.
Our correspondent Andy Rosejan has more from Washington.
President Trump was pretty bellicose in his language. He said that foreign films, he said, were actually propaganda and therefore were a national security threat. And he said these tariffs would begin immediately. But then later on in the day, he sort of backed off a little bit. The White House said, no, these tariffs will not be beginning right away. And Trump said at the White House, he said, look, I'm going to work with studios to try to figure out here how we can make this work. So it doesn't sound like it's going to happen anytime soon, but so many questions here. When you talk about tariffs on goods that sit in a crate in a port, that's one thing. But movies, Jafar, of course, are intellectual property. And there's so many questions. For example, a movie that might be shot in Turkey Remember that movie a couple of years ago called After Sun? Very critically acclaimed movie. Well, it was mainly an American cast and crew that made it. So, you know, what if a script is written, for example, in England, but shot someplace else? There's so many questions here. And as you mentioned, would these tariffs apply to movies that are shown in a theater or in a streaming service? And would they apply to the cost of production or on the back end, the profits that the movie makes eventually? So a lot of questions yet to be answered, and they're going to have to really do a lot of sorting out here to figure it out.
Rina Shah, a political advisor and commentator, says Trump wants to make Hollywood great again, but it will escalate trade tensions with other countries.
It's important to note that Trump's 100% tariff on foreign films is really aimed at boosting U.S. production. But what it ignores here is Hollywood's $30 billion in global revenue in 2024, with a $15.3 billion trade surplus. So imposing tariffs on intellectual property like films, which is a U.S. export strength, invites retaliation, as we just saw with China's recent 125% tariff on U.S. exports. And what it does is plans to curb Hollywood imports. This escalates trade tensions and also potentially costs the U.S. film industry $500 million in Chinese box office revenue. Labeling foreign films a quote-unquote national security threat is a stretch. But given that countries like Australia and the UK, which are key U.S. allies, they offer tax incentives. For example, Australia has a 30% location offset. They do that to attract productions, but these incentives really drive global film spending, and that's projected at $248 billion in 2025. So retaliatory measures from allies like Europe's hinted mirror quotas could slash U.S. film exports, and that weakens our geopolitical ties.
Oil prices have dropped to their lowest levels in years, shaking up the global energy market and impacting economies worldwide. Let's take a closer look.
OPEC is ramping up production for the second month in a row, just as President Trump's tariffs raised concerns about a global slowdown. The group has agreed to increase production by 411,000 barrels per day in June, the same amount as last month. U.S. oil future prices recovered slightly on Tuesday morning after taking another hit on Monday, falling by 4%. That's a 20% drop this year already, after the worst monthly decline since way back in 2021. Recent trading saw prices fall by over $2. Barclays even lowered its Brent oil price forecast by $4 for the next couple of years. China, the world's largest oil importer, is now urging exporters to focus on domestic sales as tariffs hit overseas demand. But this could make deflation worse. Goldman Sachs thinks retail inflation in China could hit zero this year, with wholesale prices dropping too. If this keeps up, oil prices could fall even further. Despite increasing calls for economic stimulus to counteract these pressures, Beijing is likely to hold off on major fiscal measures for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia, the slump in oil prices has hit economic growth just as non-oil business sector growth eases after reaching decade highs. But this fall in jet fuel prices is bringing much-needed relief to the airline industry, with some airline stocks showing positive movement. Shares of Australia's Qantas Airways climbed more than 5% on Monday, hitting a one-month high.
A recent report by Japan's government says the buildup of tectonic strains off its southwest Pacific coast could cause a megaquake that could kill as many as 300,000 people. Japan is already one of the most earthquake-prone countries in the world, and authorities now say the chances of a magnitude 8 to 9 quake stands at about 80%. Patrick Falk reports from Tokyo.
Earthquake, earthquake, prepare for strong shaking.
This is an app alert millions of people in Japan will receive in the event of disaster. Called NERF, it's the brainchild of Daiki Ishimori. His home in Miyagi Prefecture was crushed by the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake. He's been committed to warning others of danger ever since.
This is a strong motion monitor. It displays real-time seismic intensity.
Ishimori and his team gather data by the second to share with users. But there's no telling, he says, when exactly a quake might strike.
With current technology, it is impossible. Japan's earthquake early warning system is designed to alert people about earthquakes, not predict them.
A government report released early this month warns the chances of a megaquake are high. It says accumulating pressure along a seabed zone known as the Nankai Trough could result in a once-in-a-century shock with devastating consequences.
The government report projects an economic loss of around $1.8 trillion in the event of a megaquake. That's equivalent to around half of Japan's total gross domestic product.
It's precisely the scenario Professor Osamu Takahashi has spent years trying to prevent. An architect at the Tokyo University of Science, he's a pioneer of quake-resistant building design in Japan.
In the event of a massive earthquake, it may sound strange, but it would be like a large number of bombs falling.
Close to the university is a residential building he's reinforced to make it quake-proof. He says it can withstand a magnitude 9 megathrust.
Diagonal pipes, modified from oil dampeners used on bullet trains, have been installed on the building.
Rubber connectors give the structure flexibility and can prevent it from collapsing. But most buildings in Japan don't have this kind of protection. To reinforce them all would take years and carry a high cost. These images show the aftermath of the 2024 magnitude 7 earthquake that struck Noto town in western Japan, recorded by a survivor. Homes reduced to rubble everywhere.
A magnitude 7 earthquake is extremely powerful. You cannot stand up. Inside the house, everything collapses.
The government is launching a resilience plan in 2026 to accelerate infrastructure development and mitigate risk. Hopes are the country will be ready in time should disaster strike. Patrick Falk, TRT World, Tokyo.
The climate crisis isn't just melting glaciers and fueling wildfires. It's quietly transforming how the world grows its food. With rising temperatures, erratic rainfall and growing water scarcity, the global agriculture industry is being forced to evolve. One case from Chile shows how even the most water-intensive crop can adapt. Amar Bakalola reports.
A single kilogram of rice can require up to 2,500 liters of water when grown the traditional way. But in Chile, where water has become increasingly scarce, that method is no longer viable. For more than a decade, drought has plagued the South American country, affecting ecosystems, water supply, and agriculture.
Farmers are increasingly facing less water availability, and the same is happening around the world. Many of the regions where a large portion of the rice consumed today is produced are experiencing drought. The way to produce the rice of the future will have to follow this path.
To meet this challenge, scientists have developed a new rice strain. It's a hybrid between a local Chilean seed and hardy Russian variety, known for thriving in cooler, drier conditions.
Rice cultivation has always been done under flooded conditions. Basically, as I say, the older folks in the countryside were used to flooding, whether for reasons like weed control, temperature regulation, or simply out of convenience. Making such a drastic change, shifting rice to irrigation, is essentially a historic milestone, a historic step toward the future.
Instead of keeping fields permanently submerged, farmers are now using intermittent irrigation, watering only when needed. This has helped farmers to slash water use by half while boosting yields. Each seed now yields up to 30 plants, nearly 10 times more than traditional varieties.
It's the future, and we have to cultivate rice without flooding if we want a better well-being for ourselves, ensure food security, and care for the environment. This is the way.
Feeding the planet has never been easy, and it's only getting harder. From extreme heat to prolonged droughts, global agricultural productivity has dropped by 21% since 1961. According to the United Nations, the world's population is projected to cross the 10 billion mark by the mid-2080s. To keep up, farmers will need to produce at least 25% more food than they do today. With global rice consumption on the rise and drought affecting many top-producing countries, Chile's innovation could be a game changer. Trials are now being planned in Brazil, and experts believe the technique could be adapted across Asia and Africa. In the race to feed a warming planet, climate-smart farming may be agriculture's most important harvest yet. Ömer Bakkaloğlu, TRT World.
Well, that's all your business news for now. Thanks for watching.